But I want to go back to talking about DNA.
Yes.
Okay? Now, first of all, when you were a kid, you used to call DNA what?
When I was a child, I called DNA story map. And the reason I called it story map was because I understood that it was like a map or a way that guides us into how we're supposed to form. And within that story map is the story of both ourselves as individuals and how we've evolved, but also the story of all of creation. And so one of the things that I've been blessed and gifted to be able to do with a growing amount of information is to connect to God and understand how to read and hear and see where Story Map has its maybe places that are blocking it or where it needs to heal. So I called it Story Map as a child. As an adult, it took me a bit of time to understand that DNA and Story Map were the same thing, you know, because I had this whole sort of like childlike concept of Story Map. The phrase DNA only has existed for a short period of time, and DNA, as human beings understand it, is such a small thing. We have such a small understanding scientifically about what DNA is, whereas my concept of Story Map had a greater energy in the universe, and it took me a while to understand that DNA, as it was understood by science, actually was a part of Story Map, and to bring together all this understanding and to form the language to actually be able to talk about Story Map or DNA with people as part of what we're here to evolve and what we do to make that happen.
There was something that you used to call it, and you used to call it sparkles and ribbons or something, because you were seeing it. So can you talk about that?
It comes from a very literal interpretation of how things work in terms of what energy, when energy moves or dances or is doing what it needs to be doing, and how that looks. And I know that I've often looked at people and thought, oh, they're missing sparkles. It's like it's a very concrete and very literal way to explain the way it looks or appears to me. I mean, other people might see it in different ways. But I think the overwhelming way that DNA is to me is music. It's got a vibration and a rhythm, and it feels like an orchestration.
So DNA looks like music to you?
The overwhelming way that DNA presents itself to me, to my senses, when I'm thinking about it in line with God, is that it feels like music. It's an orchestration. It has vibration, it has feel, it has rhythms, and it has all these rhythms happening all over the place in the universe and in our bodies. So I often perceive DNA in a way that is where I'm like tapping into your musical score, and I can feel like, oh, there's instruments that aren't here yet, or there's instruments that are starting because something's evolving, or there's a feeling to something, or it's out of rhythm if there's large problems with a person's DNA or with DNA of certain parts of creation. For example, genetically modified corn feels to me to be totally out of tune and disconnected with the orchestration of what the Song of Life should be. The Song of Life is actually a phrase we used for DNA here in Toronto many thousands of years ago. And in the book that I'm writing, The Syntax of Time and Place, which is about the emergence of my present life, coming into places where I lived many thousands of years ago and seeing the energetic imprint and so on, and telling stories from both this life and that life together, I tell quite a long part in that book about the Song of Life. And it is about DNA, what DNA is. That's what we called it, 3,800 to 5,000 years ago, the Song of Life.
It's beautiful. It is, it's really beautiful.
You know, this takes me to something else, but it's DNA related, that I know I have articulated to a number of people in group settings or individually, and that is that the first two cells of our DNA exist in our heart. The first two cells of conception contain all the DNA of the entire universe, and all throughout our life, those first two cells never change. So the DNA of the entire universe is in our heart. because we're here to listen to the rhythm of love of the entire universe and have that be the pulse that sets our life, and that pulse is God.
You told me quite a while ago that you could feel that those two cells were growing, and that it was like a zygote. And I looked up on the web a picture of a zygote actually multiplying. And what you said is it changes, it formulates by splitting and growing, but it stays the same size, and then it expands. And I remember the day that you told me that it started expanding. Mm-hmm. You told me the day that it started, that you were aware that it was starting to grow and change in all of our hearts. Mm-hmm. And then I remember when you said to me, it's now growing.
And you know, the layers of beauty to that is that for each of us individually we're growing into love, but when we think about the whole universe being a body of love, and that this whole energy of love started growing and expanding and correcting itself in the DNA blueprint as God wrote the Song of Life, and that now it's starting to grow throughout the universe and affecting more and more of the body of creation. There's also that beauty that's occurring. You know, the last couple of weeks, as I've been walking around Toronto or out in the country talking to people, or you know, doing intuitive healing sessions with people about their DNA corrections, about their path into the new consciousness, more and more people are articulating this palpable feeling of joy and expectation of good things. People will say, if I watch the news, I can't believe that it's possible for me to actually think things are getting better, and that I'm feeling really happy and really something bigger than hope. And people have been articulating that over and over, and that's because this expansion of this energy in its correction, from its correct base outward, which is love as the core, is starting to be felt by more and more and more of creation. God is bringing it about.